We're excited to have a digital marketing expert, Neal Schaffer, with us as an acclaimed author, strategist, and funky drummer. Neal shares insights from his killer new book, Digital Threads, which will help amplify your brand in a digital-first world. Please welcome to Dealcasters, your digital marketing coach and our friend, the amazing Neal Schaffer.
Thank you, gentlemen. I had to do it. You know, This is actually an ice cream cup that they sell at Dodger Stadium that I've never been into a cup. Yeah, so it's really small. But yeah, and hey, the Dodgers, the Braves, the best gift to the Dodgers was, Freddie Freeman. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
What a heartbreaking way to start the show, man.
But hey, Al Downing, the Dodger pitcher Al Downing was the one who threw Hank Aaron's home run ball that broke the record back in the day. I still remember that. So it's payback. All right, we're going back. We're going back in time here. This is not a baseball podcast.
But I will say, and maybe it's because I've moved a long time ago. When I was a younger man, I was a Dodgers fan, especially back in the days of Dodgers Yankees. Remember when the Dodgers, back when Kirk Gibson limped onto the field, that was probably one of the most incredible baseball plays of all time. But I moved to Atlanta, and my Baltimore team, who had been bad for so many years, I still pull for them a little bit. But as Chris knows, I live 10 minutes from the Braves Stadium. I go to a lot of games, and they're fun to watch and fun team.
When the Dodgers play in Atlanta,
yes.
I mean, that scares the heck out of me, man. Like that's intimidating. So I do not want to face the Braves in the playoffs.
How is that still allowed, by the way? But anyway, I digress. That's what we call an audio pattern interrupt. And for those that are just listening on audio podcast, we started the show, introduced Neal, and he had the tiniest little Los Angeles Dodgers batting helmet on his head, which is actually made for ice cream. And as he was being introduced, it slipped off his head, and it couldn't have been more perfect for the show. But Neal, I can't wait to dig into this because as expected, when I read Digital Threads and I devoured it, it was something that I was, I know I've got a lot of work to do, right? And we're going to get into it. And I want to introduce you to our listeners, but it really feels like, listen, just go to nealschaffer.com. It's Fractional CMO, and he does all of the things, and he really works with businesses to develop so much social marketing, so much, digital marketing, essentially. But what I really wanted to do is focus on this book, because the basis of this book, and seemingly the basis of the podcast, Your Digital Marketing Coach, is what we call a digital first approach, as opposed to what someone would say like a human first approach. You're not excluding humans, but you're talking about being a digital first approach as it relates to a business or entrepreneur. Can you just sort of unpack what a digital first thing is for our viewers and our listeners?
Yeah, I think the easiest, and by the way, thank you for the kind introduction.
Oh, dude, yeah.
You guys, I'll slip you a 20 later. But anyway, the digital first, if we go back, and I start Digital Threads with going back to the days of COVID, because if you live in a world where you cannot physically meet someone, how do you get the word out about your business? In my case, it was the word out about my previous book called The Age of Influence. But any business out there had the same struggle. So you had to basically rely on digital means to do so, right? Meaning, emails. All of a sudden, we all started getting all these emails from all these companies. Is everything okay, right? Social media became a big thing. And really, search engines, and we can go through all the different digital marketing channels that exist. But it's really putting digital not as an afterthought, like, well, we still do all this traditional advertising. We're going to keep doing that. Maybe we'll spend a little bit on digital, to really understanding that the consumer today, the business today, is overwhelmingly digital first, right? The digital transformation has been a word that's lived for like decades now. So, digital is not an afterthought. It should be the forefront of how you consider your marketing. And that's the whole idea. Think digital first. Not to say that traditional means cannot be, effective, but let's think digital first and go from there in developing our marketing as a way to reach to other people, knowing that this is only going to accelerate with every passing year, with every new generation, the younger we are, the more digital first we become.
Yeah, it's really about meeting. It's really about meeting the people where they're at, right? It's not like there's less and less people that are walking into a retail store to buy things. I mean, there are people that are out there doing that, but before they even walk in that door, they've done tons of research for any type of product and any type of service that's being the businesses that Jim and I have are service-based businesses, right? Where we have to get found, and that's the only way to do it. And they're not coming to my front door and knocking on my front door saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a podcast producer," right? It's going and meeting the consumers where they're at. Why do you think people are so afraid of that? Why are the companies that you work with, why are they not thinking digital first?
Yeah, well, I wanted to take a step back on your comment about, we don't buy from physical places. It's really interesting. I thought a lot about this recently. There's two big shopping centers near where I live in Irvine, California. One is in Laguna Hills, California, called the Laguna Hills Mall. Old school mall, big block, department stores, on each end of the mall, enclosed, 2-story. And then in Irvine, we have something called the Irvine Spectrum. Irvine Spectrum is basically single story, although there's some department stores with two stories, but it's basically an outdoor thing where you walk from store to store, right? So I want to say a year ago, the Laguna Hills Mall just closed down. It's all been bulldozed. They'll probably build homes or something there. The Irvine Spectrum is going as hot as ever because they have a vibe, right? I'm going to say they become Instagrammable, because they have a Ferris wheel. Whenever, like for the Chinese New Year, they're going to do something. Whenever there's big Christmas tree, but it's also the Southern California vibe of enjoying the outdoors. They have like yoga sessions in the morning, outside, and all these outside things that you can do with photo spots that make it a really, really popular attraction with Gen Z. So from that, a lot of user-generated content gets generated, and it becomes a magnet that people want to come to. So it's really interesting. But getting back to your question, why isn't everyone digital first? I think a lot of people, or a lot of small businesses, I should say, number one, rely a lot on agencies. And the whole business model of an agency is they want to maintain a business, so they're going to maintain the status quo. Right? Why change the status quo? It comes down to a business model, right? Others, it's just they're not educated. They have an old way of thinking about marketing. They don't understand, especially the older you are and the less you are on social media, the less you understand the potential that platforms like TikTok can have for engaging with generations like Gen Z. So it's really a combination of things. How do you do your current marketing, education? In some cases, especially for small businesses, they're reliant on that marketing person that they hire, and the marketing person that they hire really relies on their past experiences. So I've had brands I've worked with where it was a consumer brand. They really only wanted to focus on Instagram because that's where the marketing person spent their most time, right? Well, they're targeting multiple generations. What about Facebook? What about TikTok? It should be a data-driven exercise above and beyond the scope of one person's experience. But the smaller the business, the less of a luxury you have. And therefore, I get brought in by CEOs who are a little bit more innovative, a little bit more forward-looking. They want to understand what they're missing out on. They want to do a reset. And, they want me to work with their staff and train them. And they want to have what I would call, and, what Ann Hanley called one of the testimonials I got for Digital Threads. She's like, this is like a modern marketing guide. And I would agree. It's like, this is the way that modern marketing works. But so many small businesses don't get it. And that's really why I wrote the book, and why, every chapter in the book could be its own. It could be its own speech. It could be its own course. It could be another book. I could write a book just on user-generated content, or just on content repurposing, right? So every chapter really has intent, and I think has a lot of meaning. And I really want it to raise the level, right? Like my motto is educate and empower. And I want to empower, millions of small businesses and entrepreneurs and content creators and service providers to leverage this.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcasters sent you. Now back to the show.
Wow. Yeah. And Neal, one of the things too, and kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, like the three of us, for all of those out there in streaming land, we won't say TV land, right? That's a whole change. We're native analogs, but our children, and I don't know, probably people up to about 40 or so are what we call native digitals, right? They're used to this thing. So you're bringing to them stuff like, yeah, this perfectly makes sense. But it's like, I think Chris and I have become more, I don't know, I guess I could say we've all adapted to digital and see the importance. But how do you think we get these folks, one, to overcome that? And I do actually have, this is a true story, just happened today here in Cobb County where I live. We're talking about malls. Chris, I don't know if you heard about this. The town center of Cobb County, they had a sign on their door that said, they were closed and they didn't say why. Well, Georgia Power released a statement. They didn't pay their power bill. So this whole mall is dark, and all these stores are like, can't even have people come and visit them. So you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But it's like, well, I'm just going to go on Amazon and buy what I need and have it delivered to my house. And I'll probably never visit that place again. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, with COVID, we all, as consumers, just accelerated so much with all these digital services. I get like dental floss at Amazon. I mean, I have subscribe and save and the whole bit. So yeah. And I wanted to show you. I was gonna 1 second here. Hold on, it'll be fast. I promise.
You come back with an ice cream scoop LA Dodgers hat on your head.
I am an analog person. Like I still collect hats. Like I still collect CDs.
What is that plastic? What is that plastic you have in your hand?
Is there something in there?
I just posted a memory on Facebook of this iPod Nano, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, what old technology do you still have? And someone, a few people said mini disc players. Like my stereo here actually has a mini disc player, embedded in it. And I still have mini discs, right? So I'm with you guys. I have LPs. I have 45s, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I understand the convenience of modern technology as well. I understand the convenience of like Kindle and Spotify. So I think that, and maybe you two as well, but I'm a Gen Xer. And I think Gen Xers have this unique thing where we have one foot in the new world. Because when we were in college, the internet and email came about and smartphones, and we remember the old world from growing up before the internet, like what life used to be like. So we have a unique way. We're in a unique position, I think, to educate and to bring the two together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, and it's like AI, like people afraid of AI. But once you understand how to use it and you find it useful, you're going to do it more. Once you realize, well, I can put 100 books on this Kindle. And, I still don't have a Kindle. Like I prefer the experience of reading with a paperback. That's a decision I make. But I also understand it's really convenient and ebooks outsell physical books. So, and there's a reason behind that. So, for me, when I graduated from college, the graduation speech was about being a lifelong learner. And I've really taken that to heart. I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be like growing up, seeing these older people who were behind the times. I never wanted to be that way, right? And I think that mindset has really helped me, probably you two as well, gentlemen, as well. And I think, people like us will, enjoy challenges, new technologies, what have you. There are other people just stuck in their ways. And, the traditional graph of like early adopters, mass market to the laggards, it's always going to be that way for any given technology, right?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, Neal, where we were afraid to put our credit card numbers on the internet, right?
My wife still is. She will not do Apple Pay. I just started Apple Pay in all honesty. I do Venmo and stuff, but yeah, so.
Right. Yeah, and we were just afraid to share anything. Like, don't put your address in there. Don't. Now everybody is constantly documenting every single moment of their lives and just putting it out there. And that's native digital, like Jim's talking about. So I would imagine you deal with the varying degree of native analogs and native digitals, but this correlates great into the AI conversation because there is fear there still as it relates to the sharing of information and whether or not these generative models, whether it's imagery and video now is getting better and better and better. And where is this stuff coming from? Where are the copyrights? And so people are really sort of reticent. But then, those folks that are, the first movers are getting attention. And so, I guess let's talk a little bit about that. So what's your stance on AI, and are you like just jumping off into the deep end on this other stuff? Do you have one eye? Do you have one eye open on it, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, all this comes down to a discussion of, and we're targeting businesses here, right? I mean, all three of us. So does it make business sense? So take the emotions. Like, I don't care if you like it or not. Does it make business sense to use? Obviously, we've been using artificial intelligence. All the algorithms use artificial intelligence. Google uses it. We've probably used Grammarly. Probably within our Google Mail, we've seen it like correct, autocorrect or recommend corrections for us. So AI is already a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. Even in Amazon, you type in something, it suggests keywords for whatever you're searching for. So I wrote Digital Threads. It was published in October 2024. It was mainly written, in 2024, late 2023. So I already saw AI emerging. We didn't have like, O4 ChatGPT and what have you. But I realized that what businesses first needed to do is figure out where AI fits in what they're already doing, because AI itself is not a strategy, right? Like I used to say, social media is not a strategy. It complements, it replaces nothing, it complements everything. And I've been saying that, and it's the exact same thing with AI. So with marketing, and there's many ways to use AI outside of this, but we get into content creation, which I think is like the hot thing with AI, whether it's video or audio or image or text. And where does it fit into? First of all, do you have a content creation process? I mean, if you're not creating content, you need to have content in order to use it. I would never recommend you use AI to create content from scratch. That is the absolute worst thing you can do. But assuming that you're already creating some kind of content, regardless of what format it is, where can AI fit into your content creation process? And I have a dedicated chapter on that in Digital Threads. And I would say, fast forward to today, and it's only been a few months since the book was published. The promise of AI is that it's going to help you do everything faster and better. And so I try every single marketing process that I have, and when I work with clients, is there a way we can use AI for this? Right. And I'll experiment with a prompt. And you know what? Sometimes it's not ready for prime time. Sometimes it's quicker for me to do it outside of AI. Awesome, right? But there's more and more times, like frequently on a daily basis, where it makes sense. Let me experiment a little bit with the prompts, and then let's put in a custom GPT and go from there. So now you get to a point, and in the book, in Digital Threads, I talk about like a library of content and all these different things. It gets to a point, and I'm sure you two gentlemen have faced this as well, where you feel really comfortable. Like I can create content on a daily basis across all these platforms. It becomes a lot easier and quicker to do, and you actually become better at it. So then you could spend more time engaging with people, developing relationships, right? Knowing that, you're able to develop that content, because the key thing about using AI for content creation is the content has to start with you. It has to start with you speaking, with your ideas, your transcripts, your videos. And if you have that content, and it might be buried in like webinars you did, or speeches you gave, or maybe email conversations, or maybe conversations that your salespeople have on Zoom that you've recorded and put into Otter, wherever it is, if that content exists, then what AI is really, really good at is repurposing that content, right? It's based on your ideas, your perspective, your tone, your values, your products, your brand. So anytime it is repurposed into something, yes, it is AI created, but the base is you. And that takes it from developing something from scratch to looking and editing a final copy, like from zero to hero in very little time. But you have to put in the reps, as the great Kobe Bryant would say. You have to have that initial content. The great thing is you probably already have it, right? You just need to dig into those IP, find the assets, feed it into whatever way you feed your AI, your LLMs, or create your own LLM. And you're off to the races, and you're going to get just a personalized, especially when you start working with custom GPTs, you begin to get a personalized and repeatable process of using AI, and it only gets better from there. So it isn't rocket science. It takes a little bit of AI literacy. It takes a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of experimentation, but every single person can get there. And, I started listening to Michael Stelzner. He comes up in every conversation we have here, his AI podcast. And I'm only, I saw him at Vid Summit last year, And I'm still like in July of 2024 as podcast, but it's like, oh my God, this is so old, right? Of course, we all know this. And I think a few years from now, the way we talk about AI today is just going to be so commonplace. But once again, those who get up to speed quicker reap the benefits. And I hope everybody, if there's one thing you get out of today's interview, it's like, let's find more ways to use ChatGPT or whatever. Let's experiment with, what are things that take up a lot of time? Is there a way we can use AI? And you might be pleasantly surprised, whether it's for work or personal life. I mean, I flew out to Tokyo 2 weeks ago. Guy next to me, first time going to Tokyo. I'm like, hey, where you headed? He goes, to be honest with you, and he's like an engineer, okay? So he's a little geeky, but he's like, I asked all my friends like where I should go in Tokyo, and I took all their recommendations, put it into ChatGPT, and it made an itinerary for me. So I don't have to think about it, and I'm going to hit all the best spots in the most effective way. I'm like, dude, exactly, right? It's a no-brainer. So hopefully that will dumb it down for those that aren't yet into AI. And that's really where you should start. The whole AI imagery, it takes a lot of iterations to get it right in my experience. AI audio is there, but there's a greater value to being human with the emergence of AI. Because you guys probably as well, you can see when it's AI generated, right?
Absolutely.
When you see that social media post. So, and I think we're all going to get attuned to that. So it's actually the most human's going to win, right? And video, like showing up live, doing videos is the ultimate way to deliver value, to create an emotional connection that AI cannot create. So,
and you just told us, and storytelling is a differentiator, right? You just told a story about a guy that you met that was an engineer and kind of geeky, and that whole thing. Like, do you think AI? I mean, maybe it will eventually. It's getting better, but that is, all humans listening and watching, like this is what we have as a differentiator to connect with people. And, it's our stories. Jim, I know you had a question. We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show.
Yeah. So Neal, I know you talk a lot in the book, right? How we're using digital to build relationships and know, like, and trust. And going back to what you just talked about, do you think that engagement is more important than content creation, especially if someone's just starting out and, we'll say sewing or building their digital threads?
Yeah. Content creation becomes an absolute commodity. Right. I think any of us who have used ChatGPT for a year or any of these tools, we get it, right? It's like, I can create more content than I can publish. So too much is too much, but the engagement is what the AI can't do. And in fact, I will say I see a lot more AI generated comments like on LinkedIn, right?
Oh, I know.
Sure, yeah. Like live streams, right? Oh, like this was a great conversation. Wait, it's only scheduled. I haven't published it yet. But anyway, I digress, right? But yes. So, and I have another book out. I published just 2 weeks before Digital Threads called Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth. And I talk about this concept of a LinkedIn playbook. And I'd say, you need to have a minimum amount of content published, right? You need to have credibility. You need to have social proof. You need to give people something to look through in your feed when they go to your profile. Also, there's something I didn't talk about in the book that it's only, emerged in the last few months is the topic of, generative AI search. So you actually want to have, I talk about a library of content for traditional search engines like Google, but you want to have content out there on all these platforms for the large language models, right? And I think we're only beginning to realize this today. So you need to have a minimum content. Once a week, awesome. If you can commit to that, that's great. But if you publish one content per week, engage with 5 or 10 people every day. Go into your feed, like the people you follow, leave 5 comments a day, 10 comments a day. I know I don't like to put numbers behind relationships. It's right. But if that gives you a way of tracking your progress, that's really what you need to be doing. Show up in people's notifications, find new people to connect with, to engage with, do searches on LinkedIn for, whoever you want to network with, or on Instagram or TikTok for topics that you're personally interested in or that you work in. But that is really what will differentiate. That will help you develop your own circle because just publishing content, it's a one-way conversation. And the social networks do not like that, right? They, LinkedIn, time and time, as an example, has always said, we will show more content from people who engage more with their networks, with the feed. So take that as a hint that you really need a balance. And yes, over time, the content creation takes time, which you can accelerate with AI, but the engagement has to be manual. But it's also, that's where the art is, the creativity is. That's where the human, conversations and based on your own objectives of who you want to connect to and why. I mean, I just had someone on LinkedIn, we went to the same college, and he reached out to me and he goes, "Hey, I'm in like startup equity and I see you're in marketing and I don't know, let's have a conversation." And I'm like, absolutely, right? So he gave me some really, really great advice, and he has some connections with like a big famous VC incubator in the Silicon Valley. So maybe there'll be some business. And guess what? He also is involved in private equity. So he's looking for new investors, right? I'm not immediately interested in that. Maybe in the future, who knows? But this is the type of thing that came out of this seemingly random, but actually very strategic thing of saying, you know what? I'm going to start reaching out to people who went to the same university or college because we have that in common, right?
Yeah.
And I do this when I go to Japan. I'm going back to Japan next week. I'm going to a new city called Nagoya. So I'm reaching out to people with marketing in their title in Nagoya, saying, "Hey, I love networking with other marketers when I travel. I'd love to meet you when I'm in town. Let's connect," right? And that's how that's a physical trip, but you could be doing this virtually 24/7.
Right. Wow.
I love that. So if we could, let's pivot a little bit, because we're talking a lot about social. And in the book, Digital Threads, and by the way, if you're over on Amazon, dealcasters.live, the book Digital Threads is available in the carousel, as well as a workbook, which is awesome because, basically at the end of every chapter, you've got assignments and you're putting in your own information. And lo and behold, you're like, Neal is now running to go get some more CDs, I think, or a little hat to put on his head. But the workbook there's the workbook. Look at that. Nice. Oh, like there's nothing like a good physical workbook to yes. And by the time you get through that, you're just going to be like the most amazing Neal Schaffer you could possibly be. But I wanted to talk, the one thing that really, and I talked about this initially when Jim and I were kibitzing here before the show, the best books are the ones that you want to get something out of, and they get under your skin, and you're like, God, that's okay, I need to do this. This is something I need to do. And it does this. Your book highlights this SES framework. And, it stands for search, email, and social. And I thought to myself, okay, Neal Schaffer is a big social media guy, right? I've seen him in the social media marketing world. He speaks on stages at social. Why do we have social last after email? And of course, search, right? You got to get found, the whole know, like, and trust thing. And you go through the AIDA thing and how that's altered slightly as digital is now, a part of that. And I'd love for you to kind of walk us through that framework and how that applies to SES, because that really turned me upside down and how I need to apply what I'm doing on my website.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind introduction. So as you said, I've always been known as a social media marketer. And in 2020, I published The Age of Influence, was a book about influencer marketing, which, mainly social media. But that book really brought me into what we can call traditional digital marketing because, it was COVID when it came out, March 2020, California went on lockdown where I live, like it did everywhere else. And all these companies were reaching out to me saying they wanted help with influencer marketing. But when I looked into what they wanted to achieve, I realized that there were other ways that they could achieve it probably better than they could with influencer marketing. It's almost like going to the doctor and saying, I think I have X disease. Please give me medicine, instead of asking the doctor for a diagnosis. And I bring up this analogy in the book as well. And I think a lot of people do this. They read a blog post, maybe they listen to your guys' podcast, like, oh, we need this. Well, you really want to consult with an expert to understand, do you really need that or not? Is there something better? And so often I found myself saying, you know what? You want to do influencer marketing. You only have 200 followers on Instagram. You've only published like 5 posts. I don't think it's going to go well, right? Just based on my professional experience. But, so that was the beginning of like this SES framework where there's other components you can do. And also in the book, I didn't give a name to it, but there's also an order of things, right? I talk about like the Maslow's, order of hierarchy of needs. But in a similar way, there is an order of steps that you should take in this modern marketing infrastructure. And this is one of them, is that, before the influencer marketing, you need content, right? And in order to, have content, you should be creating in a strategic way. And the most important place to have your content is on your website. And the most important place to make sure it gets seen is through search engines. So this is where, I came up with the first S, which is at the beginning, you need to have content, because guess what? You can repurpose that content into Instagram Reels, into carousel posts, into text posts. I have clients that do this. It's not hard to do, but you have to have your mini LLM in AI terms, but you need to have that content, especially because you need a digital storefront. That's your website. So you should really work on that first, in my honest opinion. And you should build up this content, which over time is going to help you rank in search engines. And let's throw in generative AI search as well. Also requires content. So it's really one and the same. And you need to be discovered. And guess what? When we talk about search engine discoverability, it's not just Google and it's not just ChatGPT. It's also TikTok, which really is a search engine for Gen Z, right? It's also YouTube. It's, a lot of social networks, some more than others. But in other words, the whole idea about search is you want to become discoverable. And it's more than just Google, but it all starts with building what I call a library of content. So I'd have companies reach out to me. They wanted to do influencer marketing without having any of the other things. It's like, hold on, let's take a step back and let's start with that. But here's the thing though, 99% of your traffic is not going to convert. So you start building this library of content, you start getting traffic to your website, but no one's, buying anything. No one's filling out your contact form. You need to find a way to convert those people into becoming a prospect, into becoming a future customer, into continuing a conversation. And the only way to do that is if somehow you get them on your email list, right? Which is the ultimate way to keeping communication, regardless of what social media or Google updates they do. And the way to do that is you offer something called a lead magnet. You give them an incentive. Go to any e-commerce website, they're going to throw out a 10% off coupon for your email address. It's the same concept. Or go to any B2B SaaS company, 30-day free trial. It's the same thing. They're getting an email address. They're going to nurture that relationship over time. So I found, because I've done social media marketing for so long, I come to the conclusion in the book, and I show you my data from all of my social media and the dwindling traffic that a company will get from social media over time, because they want you to stay on the platform. The social media today is just vastly different than it was before COVID, right? And I think a lot of businesses still chase that shiny social media object. And I'm saying, hold on here. Like, yes, it's valuable in a different way. It's still valuable, but these other things are equally valuable. And that's why I put the social last, because I don't have to promote social. Everyone wants to do it. But the way I talk about social and digital threads is I'm not talking about you need to publish X times a week and do the engagement. I'm basically saying businesses, you're basically screwed, right? The algorithms are always going to favor people, content creators like, our hosts here. And businesses just do not have the DNA to become an influencer, to become a content creator. So you're better off just, collaborating with them, getting user-generated content developed or generated. And there's different ways to do that. And I have a chapter on that as well. In other words, social media was made for people, not for businesses. And I've been saying this for over a decade.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about the game changer for your audio setup. Of course, it's the one and only Shure SM7B microphone. This iconic beauty is a go-to for top-notch podcasts. You've seen it on stream. It's the perfect microphone for any environment. You don't need a fancy studio. It's got built-in protection that handles background noise like a pro. Jim and I love ours, and you can level up your audio game today. Just check out the show notes for the links. Now back to the show. This is the other thing that this book messed me up in a good way.
I like messing people up.
No, I know you do. I know you do, because it's like that's what makes you better. Like you go through. Okay, there's a little bit of struggle here. How can I get better? The algorithms, right? I have always been like, okay, this is freaking witchcraft, right? The SEO and the algorithm of YouTube and the algorithm of Meta and all of these things. and I've always had not a great relationship with algorithm, and you go in depth about actually having a relationship with an algorithm, and it's the first time that I've watched seminars and webinars and listened to podcasts about SEO, and it makes sense, but this really kind of broke it down and made sense for me. Can you talk about, like the relationship you need to have with the algorithms, and not like the algorithm being one algorithm, right? And it's keywords, it's thinking about people searching for you on these particular platforms, because that to me really is the thread that I felt most connected to.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it gave you another perspective. So I think, as marketers, it's like the algorithm is the devil. It's absolutely evil.
Yeah.
And we've all been hit by it. And it's always changing. And it always will be, because it is an algorithm. It's always trying to fine tune itself. But if we take the mindset that the algorithm is just trying to help every social media user or every, Google searcher find the best content by the best people, that's basically what it's doing. So by trying to hack the algorithm, you're always one step behind the algorithm anyway, because the algorithm is always changing. And those that try to hack it, trust me, Google, you might be successful hacking Google for a short period of time, but at some point they come in and it's like, oh, you're trying to hack me, and they will degrade you. So I think, the way to look at the algorithm is it's the mechanics of trying to unsurface the best content for the right people. So give the algorithm what it wants. Right. So I'm not talking about hacking it, but just understanding. And I talk about it. And you mentioned, Chris, the term recon. You did some recon before, and I bring up that concept in the book. It was actually Daryl Eves who brought it up to me. But create a second profile on a YouTube or on a TikTok or Instagram, where you can create multiple profiles and just start following topics that your target user might follow or might engage with, and see what content comes up, right? And I think the problem that a lot of marketers or business owners have is they don't spend enough time in social media to be able to see it. Right. But those that do, it's like, oh my gosh, like on LinkedIn, polls are going crazy. We need to do a poll. And not today, folks, but like 2 years ago, there was a time. So because if you spend enough time in you realize what the algorithm favors. They'll give the algorithm what it favors. Today, we know in general, even with a helpful content update, I am like a lot of other people, a lot of smaller businesses, bloggers that got hit really hard with it. Like the exact same content, ranked number 1 today, not even in the top 100 tomorrow. Like, what's going on, right? It was helpful, but Google has their own way of changing the algorithm. They have their own way of giving new sites a chance versus old sites or whatever it might be. We need to understand what they're doing. We need to understand what's ranking, just like we need to understand what shows up in the social media feed. And we need to see, hey, just like you said that I messed you up. Well, Google and the algorithms are always going to mess us up. The worst thing you can do is curse the algorithms. The best thing you can do is go, okay, game on. Because it's not like they're not showing content anymore, right? What is the content they're showing? What can I learn from that? Ultimately, in social media, it's a video first approach, which is going to get you the most visibility. Even LinkedIn now has a dedicated video tab in their app, and they're really pushing that. Although LinkedIn is still very varied, but obviously the other platforms, it's clearly video first is one thing. It's also, hey, guess what? People are not advertising in these videos. They're having natural conversations. So that's the other thing that businesses need to realize, that social media is not for promotion. And I'd say the same about search engines, right? Like, what content's showing up? When you do a search in ChatGPT, what's showing up? Why is it showing up? It's having that really inquisitive mind, right? Of being curious and then trying to, my whole life was just reverse engineering, right? Why is this happening? Because there are reasons. The algorithm does work on science, right? It does have instructions. So, what is it? And you realize, what? Maybe I used to rank for this content on Google, but you know what? My content, maybe it's stale. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 years old. AI has changed a lot in 2 or 3 years. Maybe I should update my content. Or hey, that number 1, number 2, number 3, they all have like infographics and tables in their blog posts. I only have text. Like anybody can go to ChatGPT and generate text, right? But so what is the information gain? A lot of SEOers have that term now. Like, when I read your blog post, is there any information gain? If not, it's just it's just a regurgitation that anybody manipulating ChatGPT could do. It has no value. So, we need to up our game, right? And so the algorithm changes give us an opportunity to up our game. And I take them as challenges and try to figure out what can I do better. Obviously, you want to serve the end reader. It's not about serving the algorithm, but at the same point or at the same time, you should be formatting your content in a way, or if you want to go a little bit out of your way to give a little bit of extra information that the search engine algorithm would like, probably your readers would enjoy it as well, right? So I don't want you to think algorithm first, right? And the content should always be about the end user and developing that relationship and providing value. But there are many ways to do it. And I would be aware, right? I'd be really cognizant of the algorithm when I'm creating the content, especially when it comes to search engines, but even on social media to some extent.
Yeah, like if we're creating content that's basically information, right? And then what makes it different than if Chris Stone is providing information on podcasting and Neal Schaffer is providing the very same information on podcasting? What is the difference? It's Neal Schaffer and it's Chris Stone. It's us and how we're presenting that information, right? And so that's really what it's about. And my guess is that the content that's winning is the content that is serving the most people, is original, is not that it can be found in a million other different places. Something that is rising above the noise, so to speak.
Yeah, there's based on personal experience, or that company has an expertise. They actually provide an SEO tool versus an individual blogger talking about SEO. I mean, there are differences in terms of authority, and I think the emergence of generative AI has actually forced Google to make those changes because anybody can publish content about anything today, whereas you couldn't do that before AI. So yeah, it's an awakening, but it's also like, hey, if you really when we get traffic. But here's the thing that's really important when it comes to search engine traffic. You still need a library of content because you're still publishing content. You're publishing email newsletters. You're publishing content on social media, right? You're publishing lead magnets. So the content and large language models don't care. I mean, it's funny because I'm starting to get like almost in 1 month recently, I got more traffic from Bing than Google, which is really bizarre, which just goes to show you how much Google's suppressing my traffic. But hey, Microsoft ChatGPT, I'll take it. So traffic from ChatGPT is coming up. So large language models work on different algorithms, right? So even if you got hit by Google, there are still utilitarian reasons why you should develop that content. If you get traffic from Google, consider creaming, icing on the cake. But either way, it's something that you do need in modern marketing.
Neal, I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, and you were talking about video first. And I think that one of the challenges that Chris and I see with folks, I mean, whether they're guesting on podcasting is morphing into video podcasts, is how do we get these small business owners, these folks that want to create content to start with video? It seems like there's, it's still, when you really look at the numbers, like even when you talk about people that produce content on LinkedIn, it's a very small percentage. And I can't tell you how many business owners I'll ask them, like, because I think of Roger Wakefield and what he did with his plumbing company, right? It's like, why aren't you doing videos talking about, educating me about what your business does, and just put it on YouTube, let alone they could put it on their website? What do you think we can do to really show them that this works? And it's not like they got to spend millions of dollars to do it.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, and most people do not want to be in video, and I get it, right? I think it just comes down to, hey, this is not an emotional decision we're making. This is a business decision. If we want to get visibility on these social platforms or in YouTube, we need video. It's plain and clear. I mean, if you want to be on TikTok, you have to have a video, for instance, right? So it is a business decision. The old text post or drop a link in a post, it doesn't work. I just don't recommend it. I'll publish a newsletter on LinkedIn and repurpose a blog post, right, with a link inside the newsletter rather than share a link post, because I'm going to get way more impressions. And that's what it comes down to is visibility, is discoverability. And it's getting a lot harder. So if those older businesses are not doing anything visual in their social media, it just is going to get harder and harder for them to get any visibility, any discoverability. And if the business owner doesn't want to do it, maybe a podcast is a better solution. They don't necessarily have to be video first, although it can help. You can use, text to video tools to create short form video, with a voiceover, although I don't think it's the best way to do it, but it's possible. But I think if the business owner doesn't want to do it, is there someone in your company that you want to become the face of the company, or do you want to use an avatar? And I do business in Japan, and there have been some big Japanese companies that have used avatars instead of people, right? So it's possible, but it's not. It lacks the human that
Right.
is need right now. But it really is a business decision. And for any business out there, I'd say, what I would do to convince, and I know you gentlemen are selling to that market, is I always try to find a role model, right? I try to find a competitor, or maybe in a similar industry, like a Roger Wakefield, and show them what this person has accomplished doing, exactly what you're recommending they do, and seeing the visibility that they're getting. I mean, Roger Wakefield, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, if not a million, hundreds of thousands of views, if not millions of views per video. He's opening his own trade school. I mean, the guy's amazing, and he's one of the most down to earth, coolest people you'll ever meet. I don't think as a plumber he was always a video first person,
Right.
but he saw the business benefits of doing it. So,
Yeah.
I do think there's more and more people doing video, more and more businesses doing video, and it is something. And maybe it's not like the business owner showing it. Maybe it's an interview-based video like this. Maybe they feel more comfortable talking to other people, and that's fine. That's another way of doing it. There's no one right or wrong way. But really, look into, even go to the video tab in LinkedIn if you're in B2B. Just check out what other people are doing. And I think what's going to happen, and I think you two gentlemen are like me, it's like, I can do that. Why are they getting all those views? I want some of those views. That's my video game, right?
But we don't do that at all, Neal. We don't compare ourselves to anyone. No.
I mean, all it takes, and hold on a minute here. Hold on a minute here. Yeah, there we go. There's the bet screen. But I mean, that's all. This is all it takes. All it takes is an iPhone. It's not rocket science.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just technically you don't have to do video, right? You can choose to not do video, but to your point, you can also you're choosing to not get found as well, right? I mean, I just it's the bottom line, and I have conversations all the time with people about, okay, I've done this. I've spoken to people that have hundreds and hundreds of audio podcast episodes, and they're like, I really know I need to do video. And I was like, yeah, like at a minimum, record while you're recording your episode, record a video. It's not hard anymore, right? We all have Zoom accounts. I think people are hesitant to doll themselves up, and they feel like it. But I think that actually, like, we have a kind of a somewhat professional show here, Neal. But you don't necessarily have to have all of the bells and whistles. I think the important thing is to show yourself as someone that might be trusted by more customers, more people, right? And I think if you're behind these digital walls and you're not showing yourself authentically, that might backfire on you as a company.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the type of company, and this is like my next book idea, I'm still very early on in the process, but if you're the type of company where if you as the business owner go out and meet a potential client and you're able to make the sale, and you're pretty high at converting people just based on your own demeanor and personality and way of talking about, your solution and the pain points, the video is going to help you scale that to people that don't have a chance to meet you, right? You're only limited by meeting so many people in a day, but video scales 24/7 globally, obviously. So, if you are that type of outward going person, but you're not into video, you are the perfect candidate to really find some success. And once again, success in life, success in business is about experimenting. Do a 3-month pilot program, right? Look at the data, try to get some anecdotal evidence of, we got this lead or this deal because of this video. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But by not doing an experiment, right, you're never going to know. And you're just basing it off of your own human emotions and your own limited experiences. And that's, remember, we go back to the conversation where all these businesses have limited marketing based on the limited experiences of their marketing person. You're doing the same thing to your business based on your own personal emotions and personal experiences. And yeah, I mean, if it's a lifestyle business, then yeah, do whatever you want, right? But if you really want to grow your business, then you should lean into the data, the expert strategies that are working for others. And at a minimum, at least give it a try so you know.
Yeah. Neal, you brought up something too a second ago. You said, right, 3 months, right? How important do you think that having the patience to get the results? Because it seems like a lot of times someone say, well, and even with podcasting, right? Chris could talk probably for hours about PodFade. Like, well, we did 10 episodes and we didn't get a bunch of downloads, so we stopped doing it. So do you think that's part of the problem too? Is like, to build these threads, to make them strong, it takes consistency, it takes time. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is there a point when you would say like, this isn't working? Maybe it goes back to the data.
Yeah, I say 3 months, but you're absolutely right. It takes a heck of a lot longer because guess what? It takes time to get to know people, right? Think of the friends that you have. How long have you known them? Like decades for some people. So that's the problem, is that all of this takes time. Your relationships with the algorithms, your relationships with other social media users that have never met you in person. You can't expect success overnight. So I say 3 months because in 3 months, you should see some traction. You should see some numbers moving in the right direction. And if not, it is time to take a step back and say, hey, what are we doing here? But I think, if you're working with a competent team like you guys, you should see things move in the right direction. But yes, it does take time, but you want to regularly see, are things moving positively? Are things going the way that we thought they would go? So before you begin, right, I would ask any service provider you're going to work with or any marketing person or even me, where do you think we'll be in 3 months? Or where do you think we'll be in 6 months? And a lot of people are going to say, I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. And I'll tell you the same thing. But I will say in 3 months, we should have hit some of these goals. And hey, why don't we add a little bit of paid, right, to help accelerate the reach of those goals or what have you. But yeah, it takes time. I mean, I remember there was a fractional CMO client that I had, worked together 6 months, created a library of content, and then they just pulled their plug on marketing and they basically quit the startup, but they kept the blog going. And then 6 months later, they hit like 6-figure monthly, blog traffic, right? Which was much less before, because at some point the algorithm caught on and said, hey, this is really great content. So yeah, it definitely does take time. In an ideal world, you'd give it 6 to 12 months, but at least in 3 months. And when I do like fractional CMO consulting, that's my minimum gig, is like, hey, let's work together for 3 months. And you should get some ideas and some confidence and some data to support what I'm talking about. So that's the bare minimum. It's not going to happen overnight, but the more time you can give it, the better. But 3, 6, 12 months, that's sort of the timeline to get a feel if you're making progress or not.
Yeah, and it's also about developing the right KPIs, right? So like if for podcasting, for instance, if you're like brand new, just starting podcasting, like, episode 0, and, you want to develop your first 25 episodes or whatever, and you're targeting 10,000 downloads. It's like, okay, whoa. Let's talk about why we're doing this. Is it to generate more interest in, you being booked as a speaker, you selling, more books, to generate more, let's start to develop that, because downloads for a podcast are really for sponsors, are really for, and if you're just starting out a podcast and it's not hosted by Kim Kardashian or Jim Fuse, it's probably not going to get 1 million downloads per episode, right? So I think it's also like having a realistic conversation with people and just kind of saying, hey, let me just, I may not be the person to work with, because, most podcasts are not going to get that many downloads. And are you really wanting it just to get the downloads? Because I think we have to develop other ways of, like, this is showing growth. I'm getting engagement here. I'm seeing more subscribers to the YouTube channel. Whatever we're doing to try to generate, those things outside of downloads, I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. There aren't that many businesses that do this, but I've seen a lot of savvy businesses use their podcast as a lead generator. They will interview target customers,
Oh yeah.
Right. In their industry. And then they will follow up with, hey, really enjoyed the conversation. Would you be interested in a free trial, what have you? So there are very tactical ways of leveraging podcasts or using it to interview your customers, right? To deepen the relationship, to make them look good. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And, the funny thing about downloads, and this is what sort of changed my mind, how I got into live streaming my own podcast interviews, is I won't say the guy's name, but he was getting like a lot of downloads, like 10,000 downloads a month, which is really, really good, like top 1% probably. Yeah. And then I listened to him later and he's like, oh, I'm hitting like 20,000 downloads now. And I'm like, really? Like, how did you double? And he starts talking about how he got 10,000 through podcast apps and then he got 10,000 through YouTube views. And it made a lot of sense because it's the same content. By adding another channel for the same podcast content in video, he is now getting more visibility for the same content. And that should be included in the download numbers. And that just opened my mind to, oh my gosh, like there are so many more YouTube viewers than podcast listeners. Right. If you look at it that way, it's not that hard to double your number download to reach more people. And that's really what it's all about, is reaching more people with your brand, with your voice, with your content. And then if we repurpose the longer video into short form videos, you can imagine how much more visibility we're going to get for our content, our podcast, and therefore our brand. So the download number is a really funny thing. When you look at it a little bit differently, especially when we include video in the mix, you can see how you can do it exponentially better to even satisfy those people who are looking for a number. But you're absolutely right. It's not about the numbers. It's about gaining traction. Yes, you want to increase those numbers over time. But, it's like people that know nothing about podcasts that want 1,000 downloads. Well, if you want to invest in the stock market, you look at historical returns. But you're not doing the same thing when you're talking about podcast downloads because you have no data. You have no first party data. So at least my recommendation, and this is like the greatest tool, I assume you two know about it as well, but there's a tool called rephonic.com. And and Rephonic gives you an idea like, okay, find your competitors. What are they getting, right? Let's try to get like 10% of the downloads that they're getting, for instance, right? Or 20%. That's a more logical KPI because in really niche B2B industries, you're not going to get downloads in the hundreds of thousands, right? It's going to be much smaller, but in B2B, it's about quality, not quantity. So you really need to manage the KPI, as you mentioned. There's so many different ways to look at KPIs, but hopefully for those that are on the sidelines about podcasting, hopefully that gave you some ideas.
Neal, this has been awesome. I can't believe it's flown by like crazy. And one thing we didn't do is to show everybody, hey, go to nealschaffer.com. And for those of you listening, it's Neal, not IL, because
the real Neal.
The real Neal is Neal. And Schaffer spelled Schaffer. I've made that mistake before on previous podcasts, but go to nealschaffer.com, Fractional CMO, and amazing podcast, Your Digital Marketing Coach. Sorry about that as I'm scrolling and doing 38 different things here. Get the book Digital Threads. We just like barely scratched the surface on the amount of value that you get. Grab the workbook because basically when he gets under your skin and you're like, I need to do this, you have applications that you can like open up and start, increasing your value on what you're doing, getting found more, creating an email list, which is, before you're doing the social and implementing all those things. Neal, this has been amazing. Where do you hang out most? Should they go find you on LinkedIn? Or are you, I don't know, TikTok? I see you're on all the tubes, but where is the one you like to hang out most on?
Yeah, I just migrated from an iPhone 15 Pro to 16 Pro. And forgetting that I now lost the ability to download TikTok because of the restrictions.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I'm able to, my scheduler is still integrated with TikTok, so I can still publish content there. But yeah, TikTok's not going to be the place. Definitely LinkedIn. I just, we get to know more about each other's professional backgrounds, and I think we can develop a deeper, relationship that way. So find me on LinkedIn, go to nealschaffer.com, publishing, 4 blog posts a week consistently, and also have a podcast, Your Digital Marketing Coach. And yeah, find me in one of those areas. And I'm the real Neal everywhere on social media. So Neal Schaffer.
The real Neal. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks as always for joining Dealcasters. Everybody here, this has been so much great content that we really haven't been able to shout out all the people that are joining us in the chat. Sue-Ann, thank you for joining us. Marco, Scott, Halcyon, and George, thank you for joining us in the chat. And as always, don't fear the geek.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live. Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.